शुरू करते हैं। तारीख स्टार्ट करूं?
जी सर, स्टार्ट कर देते हैं।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear student, we have a very important topic today, that is traumatic myelopathy. So before starting this topic, that is traumatic myelopathy, let's start with some important anatomical information, and then after anatomy of the spine, related relevant anatomy of the spine, we will start our uh, important topic of traumatic myelopathy. So you people already know that spinal cord extends from foramen magnum up to L1. Foramen magnum up to L1. It is the extension of spinal cord, and it is divided into cervical, dorsal, lumbar, and sacral segments. And after L1 vertebra, there is a bundle of nerves in the lumbar spine. It's called as cordyceps. This is the information you people already know. That spinal cord extends from foramen magnum up to L1. It has different segments according to the relevant spine, that is cervical segment, thoracic segment, lumbar, and sacral. And at the level of L1, spinal cord ends, and after that there is a bundle of nerve which is called as cordyceps. The next important thing is that if we see the transverse section of spinal cord, then there is a H-shaped gramator, H-shaped gramator, and surrounded by white matter. H-shaped gramator in which there are sensory fiber in the dorsal horn, while motor fiber in the anterior horn. Sensory fiber in the dorsal horn and motor fibers in the dorsal anterior horn. And the white matter, which is actually in between the anterior horn and the posterior horn, and anterior and posterior horn, there is a white matter which is divided into posterior column. In between the two posterior horn, there is a called as posterior column, and anterior column, lateral column, or you called as anterior lateral column. So these are the different columns in the white matter. So the dorsal horn, in between the dorsal horn, there is a dorsal column which is further divided into two important tracts. You people already know these tracts are fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus spinatus. We will see the function of these two fasciculus later on. And in the same way, in the anterior lateral horn, there are different tracts. Some are ascending, some are descending, but the most important descending tract is corticospinal tract, which is a motor tract, and the most important ascending tract are anterior spinothalamic or lateral spinothalamic tract. Again, we will see the function of this tract later on. So I repeat, if we see the transverse section of spine, there are different columns: posterior column, anterolateral column, and in between this column, there is a bundle of motor and sensory fibers, which forms the gray matter in the spine. And there is also important thing is that in anteriorly there is a fissure which harbors the anterior spinal artery, and posteriorly there is a sulcus. So this fissure also gives you the aspect whether it is an anterior or posterior region. Anteriorly there is a fissure which harbors the anterior spinal artery. Posteriorly there is a sulcus. At the end of the presentation, I will give you time so that you can write down your questions. I will answer your questions. Okay. So according to the region of the spine, as I already told you, that there is a cervical spinal cord, thoracic spinal cord, and lumbar and sacral region. So there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. 8 arise from cervical region, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar and sacral, and 1 pair of spinal nerve from coccygeal region. So you already know that dorsal root is a sensory root, while the ventral root contain motor fibers, and these two roots unite to form spinal nerve at intervertebral foramen. This thing I already discussed, that in the center of the spine transverse section there are a bundle of nerves which are called as gray matter, which contain the sensory and motor nerve roots, while the white matter contain the ascending and descending tracts. In dorsal column, the most important ascending tracts are fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. And anterolateral column and anterior column contain the corticospinal tract, which is a descending tract, motor tract, and the ascending tract are anterior and lateral spinothalamic tract. Same thing has been discussed here, that posterior column contains fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus, and these two tracts decussate at the level of medulla oblongata, and in the same way corticospinal tract also decussate at the level of medulla. You people have studied these anatomical important things and tracts in your basic sciences class in first year MBBS in neuroanatomy, and in the same way anterolateral column contains a very important ascending tract called as spinothalamic tract, which is related with pain temperature. Pain and temperature. Posterior column contains fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus, which are related with proprioception and 2-point discrimination, position, and vibration. While corticospinal tract is related with the motor function, and if there is a damage in the corticospinal tract, depending upon the level, patient may develop quadriplegia or paraplegia, depending upon the level. We will discuss the lesion of corticospinal tract in our later segment. So there are few important definitions. One is dermatome, one is myotome. So dermatome is the area of skin innervated by sensory axon within a particular segment of a nerve root. So the area of the skin over the neck is usually supplied by C2, C3 and C4, and from C5 to T1, that are C5, C6, 7, 8, T1. These nerves supply the arm, and from T2 to D12 or T12 supply the torso, that is chest and abdominal skin, while L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, S1, and then the coccygeal nerve supplies lower limb and perineum. And myotome is a muscle supplied by spinal nerve. The important myotome in the upper limb are arm flexion, that is the function of the biceps, supplied by C5, while the wrist extension is C6, elbow extension is C7, while the muscles of the small muscles of the hand are T1. While in the lower limb, the important myotomes are muscles related with hip flexion supplied by L2, while knee extension L3 and L4, and plantar dorsiflexion supplied by L5, plantar flexion supplied by S1. So these are the important myotones in the lower. Now we start our main topic, that is myelopathy. Up till now we have discussed the important relevant anatomy, and now we start the our main topic, that is myelopathy. Before starting the our discussion over the myelopathy, let me tell you two important definitions. First is radiculopathy. Second one is myelopathy. So signs and symptoms because of any pathology of nerve root. Sign and symptoms because of pathology of nerve root is called as radiculopathy. And sign and symptoms, you can also say the clinical presentation of a pathology of nerve root is called as radiculopathy. In the same way, if there is a pathology of spinal cord anywhere, from foramen magnum up to L1, anywhere, if there is a pathology of spinal cord, the sign and symptoms or the clinical presentation because of the spinal cord pathology is referred as myelopathy. So what is myelopathy? It is a clinical presentation because of secondary to spinal cord pathology. You can explain this term in multiple ways. The easiest way is to say the clinical presentation because of the pathology of spinal cord is referred as myelopathy. Let me tell you an important thing. It is myelopathy, not myopathy. Myopathy is the pathology of muscles. It is myelopathy, pathology of spinal cord. So there are two important definitions related with the spinal injury. One is radiculopathy and other one is myelopathy. So myelopathy is the clinical presentation secondary to the spinal cord pathology, while the clinical presentation of a nerve root pathology is called as radiculopathy. So we say pathology of spinal cord. The pathology of spinal cord may occur in different ways. It may be secondary to trauma. This is called as traumatic myelopathy. It may be secondary to certain compression. It is called as compressive myelopathy. It may be secondary to some other pathology other than compression. They are called as non-compressive myelopathy. So these are three different topics. One is traumatic myelopathy, other one is compressive myelopathy, lastly non-compressive myelopathy. So these are three topics according to the mechanism. If there is a pathology secondary to trauma, it is called as traumatic myelopathy, very easy. And if there is a compression, for example, because of trauma, because of tumor, because of any disc herniation, if a spinal cord compressed because of a tumor, because of disc herniation, or because of any bony fragment causing compression over the spinal cord, so this will be referred as compressive myelopathy. And if there is no compressive element, let's say for example there is an hemorrhage, there is an ischemia, there is an infection, viral infection, say for example. So this will be referred as non-compressive myelopathy. A myelopathy has different types: traumatic, compressive, and non-compressive. It is an important examination question, and after my presentation I will give you a brief scenario so that you people can assess what are the different important questions related to exams. So one of the important question is what is myelopathy and what are the different types of myelopathy. So what is myelopathy? The clinical presentation of spinal cord pathology. Clinical presentation of spinal cord pathology. And what is radiculopathy? Clinical presentation of spinal nerve pathology. So if the nerve is compressed, if the nerve has some sort of pathology, lesion, this will be referred as radiculopathy. While if the spinal cord is involved, secondary to trauma, secondary to compression, secondary to ischemia, secondary to viral infection, and so on. So this will be referred as myelopathy. And it has different types according to the mechanism. Types are traumatic, because of trauma, compressive because of certain compression, like for example tumor, non-compressive, for example viral infection, ischemia, and so on. These things we have discussed. Mechanism of trauma you people already know. It may be fall, road traffic accident, labor can sustain injury at the construction site, and there are different other mechanisms of injury. Firearm injury, you may add firearm injury. So as you people have seen, head injury is also divided into primary and secondary head injury. In the same way, spinal injury is also divided into primary and secondary spinal cord injury. Primary and secondary spinal cord injury, and in the same way, primary spinal cord injury is because of the impact of trauma, because of impact of trauma. For example, if the patient has sustained spinal cord injury because of firearm injury, because of the bullet, because of the impaction of bullet, spinal cord has sustained some sort of contusion or hemorrhage. This will be called as primary spinal cord injury because of the impact. And after the impact, if spinal cord has some sort of edema, hemorrhage, inflammation, spinal shock, hypoxia, hypotension. So these are the ongoing complication. Ongoing complication. Ongoing complication may result in secondary spinal cord. And it is important because sometimes patient, you people see patient in emergency ward with spinal cord injury, with primary spinal cord injury. But if you do not give proper attention to different complications, if you will not give proper attention to these complications, primary as well as secondary spinal cord injury will result in massive damage. So if there is a small damage because of primary spinal cord injury, because of the impact, but after that patient may develop hemorrhage in the spinal cord, inflammation in the spinal cord, edema in the spinal cord, you can limit secondary spinal cord injury. Primary spinal cord injury can be prevented, but secondary spinal cord injury, if you give proper attention, so the damage the patient can sustain, you can decrease as much as possible if you give proper attention. Secondary spinal cord injury you can manage. So it is an important thing that patients usually are admitted in the spinal ward to for observation, just to avoid the secondary spinal cord injury. So let me explain. explain again. Primary spinal cord injury is because of the primary impact, because of the fall, maybe because of road traffic accident, maybe because of firearm injury, primary impact. But after that, patient may develop hypotension because of the spinal shock. Patient may develop hypoxia. Patient may develop edema, inflammation within the parenchyma of spinal cord. This may lead to secondary spinal cord injury, and this may worsen the primary deficit which patient has sustained because of primary spinal cord injury. So primary spinal cord injury can be prevented, but secondary spinal cord injury you have to manage. Now, if the patient has sustained spinal cord injury and patient has been shifted in emergency ward, so as a doctor, you start your managing your patient according to ATLS protocol. Or all the patients in emergency ward, you have to take these patients as polytrauma. So there is a standard protocol of ATLS. You start with airway, then breathing, then circulation, then neurological deficit, then exposure, A, B, C, D, E. You people already know. So after doing this A, B, C, D, E, then you start your relevant examination. If the patient is having spinal injury, then you first assess with brief neurological examination. And after this brief neurological examination, if it is confirmed that patient has some sort of spinal cord injury, then you go for full neurological examination. I repeat, whenever any patient comes in ER, you start ATLS protocol, and if you think that patient may have spinal cord injury, then you start with brief neurological examination. And if it is confirmed that yes, patient has some sort of spinal cord injury, then you go for full neurological examination. Actually, you want to assess his orientation, whether he is oriented or not. And if he is oriented, he said that I was in a car, I was doing this job, that job. So this gives you an impression whether the patient is oriented or not. And lastly, when you have assessed the patient can speak, number one. Number two, yes, patient is oriented. Number three, then you give some very easy command to the patient. Very easy command. Like move your toes, move your toes, or squeeze my finger. Squeeze my finger. give your finger in patient wrist, patient hand, and then give command that kindly squeeze my finger. So while giving this command that uh, move your toes or squeeze my finger, you want to assess is there any some sort of injury at the level of cervical or dorsal or lumbar level. For example, if the patient can move lower limbs, the patient can move toes, or patient can squeeze doctor's finger, so it means that probably there is no spinal cord injury at the level of probably. I say probably. You can say that probably patient has no injury at the level of cervical, dorsal or lumbar level. But if the patient cannot move toes and patient is unable to squeeze doctor's finger, it means patient has injury at cervical level. And if the patient can move lower, if the patient can squeeze doctor's finger but cannot move the toes, I repeat, if the patient can squeeze doctor's finger but cannot move the toes, obviously there is some sort of injury at dorsal or lumbar level. So this is a brief neurological examination. First you ask patient's name, then you give a command, then you check the patient's orientation, and lastly then you give simple command, squeeze my finger, move your toes. Sometimes you also give a command like protrude your tongue, protrude your tongue. So this will also give you uh, a, a clue whether the patient may have lower cranial nerve palsy or not. Lower cranial nerve palsy. Protrude your tongue. So protrude your tongue, move your finger, squeeze my finger, raise your hand, move your toes. These are the simple commands just to make a impression whether patient may have or may not have spinal cord injury at certain level. So if the patient has obvious deficit, like for example, patient cannot move toes, patient cannot raise arms, patient cannot squeeze finger, then obviously patient has injury at cervical level, and for confirmation you go for different imaging modalities. Different imaging modalities. So this is the brief neurological examination which you people conduct, if the patient is oriented. And if the patient is oriented, then you go ahead with brief neurological examination, and after that you go for full neurological examination. But if the patient is not oriented, if the patient is not oriented, if the patient is unconscious, then there are certain findings, there are certain signs, that gives you an impression that patient may have spinal cord injury. If the patient is not oriented, if the patient is unconscious, so what are the different signs which gives you a clue, which gives you an impression that patient may have neurological spinal cord injury? What are the different signs? These are the signs in front of you. If the patient upper limb and lower limbs are flaccid paralysis, and why he has developed flaccid paralysis? Maybe because of spinal shock, abnormal pattern of breathing. Patient has abnormal pattern of breathing, abdominal breathing, because of the paralysis of diaphragm. If there is loss of sphincter tone, anal tone is lost, priapism, distended bladder or abdomen, hypotension, because of spinal shock. So these are the signs which gives you an impression that patient may have spinal cord injury in an unconscious patient. Obviously, these signs you can also see in conscious patient also. But in a conscious patient, you can assess by giving different commands. But in an unconscious patient, unresponsive patient, there are different signs which are in front of you, which gives you an impression that patient may have spinal cord injury at different level. So very important slide. Spinal cord injury may be complete or incomplete. Complete means no motor, no sensory, no autonomic function are intact. What is complete cord injury? Complete cord injury means no functions are preserved, motor, sensory and autonomic. All three functions are lost, called as complete cord injury. And what is incomplete cord injury? If any of these modality or modalities are intact, it is referred as incomplete cord injury. So in complete cord injury, nothing is intact, motor, sensory, autonomic, all three functions are lost. But in incomplete injury, any of these modality or two modalities, if they are intact, or if one or two modalities are lost, any one of the modality is intact, it is called as incomplete cord injury. Same thing we have already discussed. So as I told you that patient may develop quadriplegia or paraplegia if there is an injury in the spinal cord depending upon the level. Depending upon the level. For example, if there is an injury in the cervical region, obviously patient will develop quadriplegia because corticospinal tract will be involved in the cervical region, and from below the level of this injury in cervical region, upper limb and lower limb both will be affected, and if there there is no power in the upper limb and lower limb because of the cervical injury, this will be referred as quadriplegia. But if there is an injury in the dorsal, I mean thoracic level, then upper limbs will be spared. There will be no deficit in the upper limb. This will be referred as paraplegia. So as you people know, that dorsal segment, that is the thoracic segment, is rigid, it is immobile, while cervical segment and lumbar segment are mobile. So at the junction of cervical and thoracic region, and at the junction of thoracic and lumbar region, these two junctions are prone to get fractures, to get spinal cord injury. So what are the level important level of spinal cord injuries are cervicothoracic junction and thoracolumbar junction, because one segment is mobile and other segment is rigid. One segment is mobile, other segment is rigid. So thoracolumbar junction and cervicothoracic junction are the two important region where patient may have spinal cord injury. So incomplete cord injury, I already told you, incomplete cord injury means any of the modality of spinal function, whether it is motor, sensory or autonomic function are intact, it will be referred as incomplete. And if there is no function, if no function are intact, will be referred as complete cord injury. So there are different types of incomplete cord injury. Let me tell you what are the logic behind to divide spinal cord injury into complete or incomplete. Actually, complete cord injury, you people cannot do anything. Neurosurgeon cannot do anything in complete cord injury, because whatever surgery you will perform, patient have deficit which is complete deficit. You cannot revert this deficit. But in incomplete cord injury, if you will not perform surgery, if you will not give attention, this complete cord injury will convert into complete cord injury. So this is the logic behind to divide spinal cord injury into complete and incomplete, because in complete cord injury, there is no role of surgery, but in incomplete cord injury, you have to manage this patient on emergency basis to prevent the conversion of incomplete cord injury into complete cord injury. So there are different types of there are different types of incomplete cord injury. These are in front of you: central cord syndrome, anterior posterior Brown-Séquard cord, or cord Aquinas syndrome. Central cord syndrome, as the name suggests, involves the center segment of spinal cord anteriorly. Anterior cord syndrome is also called anterior spinal artery syndrome. Posterior cord syndrome is because the posterior columns are involved. Brown-Séquard syndrome is the hemisection of cord. You have heard this term in your first year MBBS also. Cord Aquinas syndrome. When you people will be posted in our board, we will show you what are the patients of cord Aquinas syndrome. So what is central cord syndrome? Central cord syndrome is actually when the central region of spinal cord is affected. Central region of the spinal cord is affected, and because of the topographic alignment of cervical, thoracic, and lumbar segment, cervical region is affected more than lumbar level. So the hallmark feature of central cord syndrome is upper limbs are affected more than the lower limb. What is the hallmark feature of central cord syndrome? Upper limbs are affected more than the lower limb. When you assess the power of upper limb, just for example, the power of upper limb is 3/5, while the power in lower limb is 4/5. So the power in the upper limb is worse, and power in the lower limb is somewhat better than the upper limb. So what is the hallmark feature of central cord syndrome? Upper limbs are affected more than the lower limbs. And why this happens? Because of the topographic alignment of the fibers of cervical region in the center, while the fibers of the thoracic and lumbar region the in this in the outer aspect. Central cord syndrome is a hyperextension injury, like this, hyperextension injury. More commonly, this seen in the older people who have degenerative sort of changes in the spine, degenerative sort of changes in spine, osteophyte, ligamentum flavum hypertrophy, like this. So central cord syndrome is usually seen in the older people who have already some sort of degenerative changes in the spine. It is hyperextension injury. And what is anterior cord syndrome? Anterior cord syndrome is also called as anterior spinal artery syndrome, because if the anterior spinal artery is involved, this whole anterior segment will be involved, whole anterior segment. And because this segment contains corticospinal tract, will result in quadriplegia or paraplegia. Number one, if this anterior spinal artery is involved in the cervical region, patient may develop quadriplegia, or if this problem happens in dorsal level, patient may develop paraplegia. Number one problem, motor issue, paraplegia or quadriplegia. Number two, the important tract is another important tract is spinothalamic tract. Because of the lesion of the spinothalamic tract, patient may have deficit as far as pain and temperature is concerned. So because of anterior cord syndrome, which is a flexion rotational injury, anterior spinal artery is involved, may result in anterior cord syndrome. What are the important tracts which are involved in anterior cord syndrome? Two important tracts. Number one is corticospinal tract. Number two is spinothalamic tract. Because of the lesion of corticospinal tract, patient may develop quadri or paraplegia. And because of the involvement of spinothalamic tract, patient may have deficit as far as sensory modalities are concerned, pain and temperature. Obviously, dorsal column will remain intact. So in posterior cord syndrome, very easy. Posterior column is involved. Like this is the posterior column, and posterior column contains two important fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. So, and these two columns are related with 2-point discrimination and position. So, if this column is involved, patient may develop some sort of proprioception deficit, ataxia, but because corticospinal tract is intact, because spinothalamic tracts are intact, so there will be no deficit in motor or pain and temperature sensory modalities. But yes, obviously 2-point discrimination, that is fine touch will be affected, position will be affected, vibration will be affected, because these three things, 2-point discrimination, position and vibration, are the function of posterior column. Brown-Séquard syndrome is the hemisection of cord. Because of the hemisection like this, ipsilateral corticospinal tract and spinothalamic tract and dorsal column are involved, resulting in three things. Brown-Séquard syndrome usually happens because of gunshot wound, because of the penetrating wound, and this result in three important clinical features. Number one, ipsilateral motor paralysis below the level of injury. Number one, ipsilateral motor deficit below the level of injury. Number two, ipsilateral proprioception loss of proprioception, ipsilateral. And number three, contralateral pain and temperature loss. So, Brown-Séquard syndrome has three important clinical features: ipsilateral motor loss, ipsilateral loss of proprioception, and contralateral loss of pain and temperature below the level of injury. Corda-Equina syndrome, as I told you, you people will see this sort of patient when you people will be posted in our ward. Uh, Although there is, it is a triad. At least you people should know at this level that Corda-Equina syndrome is actually a triad of three things: lower extremity weakness, saddle anesthesia, and autonomic dysfunction. Autonomic dysfunction, like for example, bladder dysfunction, bowel dysfunction, sexual dysfunction. Number one, autonomic dysfunction. Number two, saddle anesthesia. Number three, lower extremity weakness. It is a triad. And as I told you, these are the different types of incomplete cord injury: central cord syndrome, anterior cord, posterior cord, Brown-Séquard, Corda-Equina syndrome. All these things are incomplete cord injury, needs your attention. They need your attention. They need certain sort of surgery to prevent the conversion of incomplete cord injury to complete cord injury. If there is a patient of complete cord injury, you people cannot perform any surgery because it is useless. But if the patient has incomplete cord injury, then you have to prevent from making it complete cord injury. At least you people should know what are the different mechanism of spinal cord injury. Just few names like hyperextension, hyperflexion, rotation, axial loading. So these are the different mechanism of spinal cord injury. If the patient has spinal cord injury, and because of this injury, patient has some sort of deficit. Let, for example, patient has power 4 by 5 in the upper limb. For example, you have a patient which has 4 by 5 power in the upper limb, 4 by 5 power. But after some time, it becomes 3 by 5. It is worsening. After some time, it becomes 2 by 5. And after one day, the power is 0 by 5. So it is unstable sort of injury. It is unstable. And if the patient has 4 by 5 power, for example, and if the patient has same level of same grade of power in upper limb or lower limb, this will be referred as stable. So unstable needs your attention. Unstable fracture, unstable spinal cord injury needs attention because it is unstable. If you will not give proper attention, patient's neurology will worse with time. So to assess the severity of spinal cord injury, there is an important scale. This is called as ASIA impairment scale. What is ASIA impairment scale? ASIA impairment scale is actually the scale to gauge the severity of spinal cord injury. There are three important grades: A, B, C, D, E. A, B, C, D, E. E is normal, A is worse. A is worse, no sensory function, no motor function. And E is normal, both sensory and motor function are intact. And in between A and E, that is B, C, and D, these are the incomplete spinal cord injury. A is complete cord injury, no sensory function, no motor function. E is completely normal, patient has both sensory and motor functions are intact. While B is incomplete, C is incomplete, D is incomplete. What is B? Sensory functions are intact, but motor functions are not intact. Sensory functions are intact, motor functions are not intact. While in C, sensory functions are intact, motor functions are preserved, but they are not fully preserved. The power is less than 3. Again, in D, motor functions has power more than 3. So it is the scale to gauge the severity of spinal cord injury. It is usually asked as far as post-graduation students are concerned. But at least at your level, you should know what is ASIA impairment scale. What is, at least you should know the name. That is what is ASIA impairment scale. You people already know the muscle strength grading. I will not take much time on this slide. Okay, very important two definitions are spinal shock or neurogenic shock. Spinal shock and neurogenic shock. What is spinal shock? After sustaining the spinal cord injury, patient develop transient loss of motor sensory function, motor loss, sensory loss, and with that patient develop areflexia. After sustaining spinal cord injury, patient develop transient loss of spinal cord function, resulting in flaccid paralysis, sensory loss, and areflexia, transient, for a short time period, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, but rarely few days. Usually we see that these functions are revert within few minutes or within few hours. So what is spinal shock? After sustaining spinal cord injury, patient develop transient loss of spinal cord function, namely flaccid paralysis, sensory loss, and air reflex, no reflex. And what is neurogenic shock? Very easy. You people already know neurogenic shock is because of the loss of sympathetic tone, which results in accumulation of blood in the venous channel. Because of that, patient developed hypotension, and again because of the loss of sympathetic supply, patient also developed bradycardia. So it is neurogenic. One of the very catastrophic event is that if the patient developed spinal cord injury in cervical region, in cervical region, then phrenic nerve is involved, and because of this, patient will develop respiratory insufficiency. That's why if the patient develop spinal cord injury at cervical level, patient usually need ventilatory support for respiratory insufficiency. So what are the different imaging modalities to assess the spinal cord injury? X-ray, CT, and MRI. MRI for soft tissue, like for example spinal cord, and CT scan and X-ray for bony injury. For bony injury, it is also Shivora, also called as Skybora. Skybora. In Pakistan, usually we use that this term for pronunciation. We say Skybora. Some and in other European countries, you will pronounce this term as Shibora. Whatever it is actually the spinal cord injury without radiological abnormality. Without radiological abnormality. Mean in children, usually children may have spinal cord injury without injury of the spine, without injury of the bony element. Patient may develop spinal cord injury, not the spine injury. Patient in children, you may see spinal cord injury without injury of the bony element. Without injury of the bony element. So, because the patient has no bony injury, that's why X-ray and CT scan will be normal. X-ray and CT scan will be normal because patient has no bony injury. But patient has spinal cord injury, and cord injury you cannot assess with the help of X-ray or CT scan. X-ray and CT scan will be normal if there is no bony injury. And I told you that in children may sustain spinal cord injury without bony injury. So this phenomena is called as Skybora, spinal cord injury without radiological abnormality. Radiology, that is X-ray and CT scan will be normal. But yes, clinically, patient will have spinal cord injury. So Skybora is spinal cord injury without radiological abnormality. Radiological examination that are X-ray and CT scan will be normal. But then how will you assess? Yes, MRI. You can do MRI. In MRI, you can see spinal cord injury. So radiological, because X-ray and CT scan are radiological examination. MRI is not a radiological examination. MRI does not use X-rays. It's a completely a different mechanism of image acquisition in MRI. And this patient and manage this patient as quickly as possible to prevent the conversion of incomplete injury into complete body. So with this, we have concluded our presentation. Let me give you the important examination question, then I will take your question. First, you should know at least the definition of myelopathy and its types. Myelopathy and its types. Next, you should know what is primary and secondary spinal cord injury. Primary because of the infect, secondary because of the ongoing complication. You should know how will you assess the patient with spinal cord injury with brief neurological examination. What is your name? Ask the detail about the incident. Give some easy command like show me your tongue, move your toes, raise your arm, raise your finger. Divide the spinal cord injury into complete and incomplete cord injury, and what are the different types of incomplete cord injury. These are the different types. And then what is the triad of Cordai-Pinner syndrome? At least you should know the headings of biomechanics. You should know the definition of spinal shock and neurogenic shock. You should know the modalities you will use to make it confirm that patient may have spinal cord injury. You should know the definition of Skybora and what is the importance of dividing the spinal cord injury into complete or incomplete. So you people are welcome to ask any question. You people can type, I will give you the answer, and I will also give you the email, my email, so that you can ask me your questions by sending me email. I will try to give you the answer within 24 hours after my operation theaters. तारिक, इनको अलाउ करना क्वेश्चंस के लिए.
सर ये लोग अलाउ है.
ओके, वेरी गुड. तारिक, ईमेल एड्रेस मेरा दे देना ताकि ये
सर आप
क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहे तो मुझे ईमेल कर दें.
सर आपका ईमेल एड्रेस सर बता दीजिए.
वो हाँ, faiq.ali
FAIQ
.ali
.ALI
@duhs.edu.pk.
@duhs.edu.pk. ठीक है सर.
type.ali
जी सर.
@duhs.edu.pk.
.pk. जी सर, सेंड कर दिया सर.
इससे कुछ स्टूडेंट के कोई क्वेश्चन तो नहीं है?
नहीं सर, सिर्फ एक ही क्वेश्चन है. एंड गुड क्लास सर, थैंक यू.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we conclude our discussion, and I will give you the answer if any question will be asked through email. Thank you very much. Thank you. ठीक है तारिक.
ओके सर.